I am Matt Grossman. I'm the director of the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research. We are pleased to be presenting this forum today. A couple of announcements. We do have a legislative staff training all day Friday in this room. If you're not already signed up for it and eligible, please join us. Our next forum is on October 2nd, so please come back for that one. We also run the Michigan Political Leadership Program, and our application deadline is at the end of this month. So please, if you are considering running for office at some point in your career or becoming a leader within the Michigan policy community, please sign up to join us. We would love to have you. Without further ado, I want to introduce our Master of Ceremonies and the Director of our Forum Program, Anne Marie Schneider.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Grossman. Well, welcome back, right? It's like coming back to school again. How many of you have attended a forum before? Oh, that is so great. I'm really, really happy to see you. So it's okay for me to say, good to see you again. Welcome back. It's like starting the first day of school. So I hope that I have the same response at the end of our series this fall and in the spring. This one we're going to focus on the census, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the day. So today is a day of reflection for many of us, and I think most of us, as it should be. It's the anniversary of September 11, 2001. You know, I'm wondering how many of you remember where you were when when this awful thing happened. Raise your hand way up. Do you remember where you were? Very good. How many of you were not born at the time? Well, this occurred to me. You know, I work with young people, and I really have to always sort of stay on top of it. You know, well, are they aware of this? Do they know who Roberta Flack is? Do they know, these kinds of things? And so I was having a conversation with Leah, who helps me out with the forums, and she said, I remember that day. I was 3 years old. My mother was taking us to preschool, my friend and I, and she stopped the car, and she turned it around and took us back home. And just seeing how all of the adults around me were so upset is something that's in my, ingrained on my mind. I'll never forget it. And when she described it, I thought about my first big traumatic event, and that was when John F. Kennedy was shot. So some of you are shaking your heads. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not the only one who remembers that. So those are the kinds of things that are important to remember. But as we look at the past and remember those important things in our history, it's also really important to look to our future. And I think that's what we're doing today. We're looking at the Census 2020 and seeing what it means to the state of Michigan, what kind of impact it can have for us. And we really want to take full advantage and live the census to its full potential. We have some amazing, and I really do think amazing panelists with us today. I've spoken with every one of them, and they know the details of the census and also the big picture of, again, what it can mean to our state. We're going to start off with Marilyn Sanders, and Marilyn is the regional director for the U.S. Census Bureau. She's based out of Chicago. She's contributed to several of the census programs over the years. I shouldn't say several, maybe 3 or 4, because they only happen so often. So she's going to talk with you about the process of the census and how important it is, and the specifics of what it means to Michigan. And then we'll have Professor Noah Durst. Dr. Durst is an assistant professor, actually, in the School of Planning, Design, and Construction. He's with the Urban and Regional Planning Program at Michigan State. He's going to look at lessons learned from previous census taken and the implications for research and policy making reflected in the census count once it's completed. Joe Scantlebury is with us on my left. Joe is the Vice President for Program Strategy at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in Battle Creek, Michigan. And he is, like the foundation, very focused on improving the lives of children and families in our state. He's going to reiterate that mission and reflect on how the census can impact the children of our state. And then last but certainly not least is Carrie Ebersol Singh, who was just freshly appointed as Executive Director of our statewide census here in Michigan. She's going to talk about how our state has been incredibly proactive in getting ready for this census. And the momentum is here, and we want it to be here and here and here. We don't want people to get worn out by it, right? So we're going to bring you on board and help us keep the momentum up for completing the census. She's also going to talk about the plan for how we might be able to do that. I think everyone's going to give us a few pointers on how we might engage them. We certainly have the right people in the audience. I can't tell you how excited I was to see real quick registration of people who are the Greater Lansing United Nations is on board with us. We have our public schools here with us, the Farm Bureau, the Michigan Department of Transportation, some of the public relations firms like Martin Waymeyer's in the room, the League of Women Voters, the Michigan Press Association, Michigan Catholic Conference. So I could go on and on. All of you have such an important role to play here. So let's get started with our discussion and talk about what that role will be. Thank you. Marilyn?
Good afternoon, and thank you. And so it's 12:02, so I keep track of time because there's 203 days left, 202, including today, left before April 1st, 2020, which is a very monumental time frame for us at the Census Bureau, and I hope for you here in the room today. To Dr. Grossman, and thank you for including the Census Bureau on this distinguished panel. As the Chicago Regional Director, I'm responsible for all surveys, decennial data collection, and data dissemination, and geographic operations for over 24 million households, 53 million people, with the state of Michigan being included in that number. I consider myself a career census employee, being that I have worked for the agency for over 43 years. I want you to consider today that the census is much more than just counting people. It is a snapshot of America that determines how congressional seats are apportioned, how state and federal dollars are distributed, where businesses choose to plant businesses, and we do all of this in support of our country. It is an opportunity every time we get this opportunity every 10 years to have our voice heard and to participate in the census. Today we are highly confident that we are on track to achieve a complete count and an accurate census. Our mission remains to count every person living in the United States and counting them only once in the right place, and making certain that we provide to the President of the United States on December 31st, 2020, the count for our nation. So I want you to focus on some key dates as I go through the presentation. So in late April, August of 2020 is when we conduct our largest field operation. December 31st, 2020 is a pivotal date. And again, March 31st of 2021 is when we deliver the redistricting counts to the states. Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution mandates that we do a head count. August 2nd, 1790 was the date of the very first census led by the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. March 6, 1902 is the date that Congress enacted legislation creating a permanent census office. And April 1st has been officially census days since 1930. Talked a little bit about the decennial censuses, and most of you have heard of the American Community Survey, which used to be a part of the decennial census. The American Community Survey is now conducted on a monthly basis with over 60,000 households being enumerated, and it is a sample survey that is now a part of the census, but it is done on a rotating basis every single month. And then we have the economic census, which produces detailed information on employment, businesses, and also industry. So the Census Bureau has been around for quite a long time, and we have continued to provide the data that is useful for making decisions, both at the local level and at the national level. How do we get a complete and accurate census? So I want to start with the circle that is the first circle, establish where to count. And that's the process that we're in the middle of currently. So in order to establish where to count, so approximately 5 or 6 years ago, we started a process in an office down in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and an office in Suitland, Maryland, where we went through verifying the addresses using local GIS that were provided by the states. We also used our own resources in-house to validate the addresses and the housing units that were on the ground. So for about 5 or 6 years, we've been doing that work in-house. Well, now we're at a point that 35% of the addresses could not be validated in-house. And so now we have approximately, in my region, 3,000 to 4,000 people that are going door to door to validate the addresses that could not be done in-house. We are hiring field representatives and listers, and they're responsible for going door to door, and they do knock on the door, which is different for this census than in the past. 2 reasons they're knocking on the door. First, they want to make certain that if they're home, that they know that they are validating their address. And secondly, to verify if there are additional housing units within the structure. So we're about 60% complete with that process over the 8-state region, and I think here in Michigan we're more than 70% complete. That operation is scheduled to end on October 4th. On October 11th, we will go through the process of doing quality control on those addresses. There is one purpose for us validating those addresses, and that is order for us to mail out the invitation and the questionnaires to all of the households late in March of 2020. Next, motivate people to respond. And that's where we've hired partnership specialists and trusted voices who are engaging with us in forming complete count committees in order to motivate and get the word out that April 1st, 2020 is important, that the census determines over $675 billion of funding to the communities in terms of schools, fire departments, roads. All of these are resources that come back to the community through an accurate census. So that's what we're doing now. We're motivating people to respond. And then I want to talk about the next circle, self-response. For the first time, the Bureau has 3 ways for you to be counted. You can be counted over the internet, and this will be the first census that we will conduct using the internet. Secondly, for the first time, you'll be able to call in and provide your census responses by phone. And thirdly, you will be able to respond by filling out the questionnaire. Now, not every household will receive a questionnaire on the first invite. And I'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. But I want you to remember something, that on the 4th mailing, by the time we get to the 4th mailing, any household who has not responded to the census will receive a paper questionnaire. Next, I want to move to group quarters. And so what we term as group quarters is those living arrangements that are not where individuals live independently or live in individual homes. So this is where we enumerate the college dormitories, the prisons, the senior living facilities, those facilities where individuals are under care. So these are the operations that will start as early as January, where we'll reach out to our list of providers, service providers, and provide them with the details of how we do the enumeration and ask for POC, a point of contact. And we'll see that along the timeline. And then non-response follow-up. This is the biggest operation. And in this environment that we're in currently today, we understand that we have a very mobile community, and we're going to need many more individuals to help us to knock on the doors for non-responding households. This is at the point where we have not received a response. There's a cutoff date, and we'll get to that later in the presentation as well. And at that particular point in time, if we have not received a questionnaire, we will hire, and our priority is to hire people local from the community in which they live to knock on the door and collect the data. And I talked a little bit about tabulating and releasing the data earlier. Where are we on the timeline? August through October, the red circle, address canvassing, where we are verifying addresses. As you can see, I've walked through this timeline as we've gone through, but I want you to look at January. January is where we will begin the first enumeration in this country, which will begin in Alaska. And for those of you who may be familiar with how we take a census, we have various ways. So in an area such as Alaska, and some of our remote areas such as our American Indian areas, we do what we call update enumerate, where we actually hire staff to go to the door and enumerate those particular segments of the population. So that's what will be going on in remote Alaska. If you're wondering why they're going in January, I think it's the best time for them to go according to the weather and what happens in Alaska. The enumeration for Alaska will be handled out of our LA office. In addition to that, I want to just highlight what happens in February. We'll start reaching out, of course, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the massive communication campaign that kicks off in January as well. But as you see in February, we'll start working through with the those individuals that do not live in single-family homes but may live in a care facility or in a university or things of that nature. I want to stop for a moment, talk a little bit about update leave, because update leave is another type of enumeration that we do. Update leave is primarily targeted in areas where there are not non-mailable addresses. These are in areas where individuals receive their mail through the post office. And so for those particular areas, we do what we call update leave, and we start that early March. We hire another set of enumerators that actually go door to door and drop off a questionnaire. If there is someone there, they will give them the questionnaire. If not, they'll drop it off. In a lot of cases, these are your areas that are seasonal. These are where maybe individuals don't live there all year round. But in order for us to take a complete count, we must make certain that we deliver a questionnaire to every household. So I talked about this. I'm just going to let you glimpse at it for a minute, but we use the U.S. Postal Service all during the decade in order to update our address list. And this just gives you some of the other types of updates that we've gone through. The local update of census addresses is really important because this is where we give every local government the opportunity to review our address list and to provide back to us updates to that address list. And then, of course, the new construction program. So we understand that once we finalize our address list for the mail out, that there are construction that's still going on in this country. So in order for us to account for those new units that that are recently built, we do a new construction program. Again, we use data to inform where we know that there has been a lot of building and construction. We also reach out to every local government because they may have things that they are planning that we want to make certain that we are aware of so that we can include it in our address list. Infill address canvassing, talked about what we're doing right now. This is a slide that I wanted to get to because it is pivotal. April 1st, 2020 is Census Day. However, as you can see, March 12th through the 20th is when we mail out the questionnaires or the invitation. And let me rephrase that, invitation. So some households will receive an invite to go online and to complete their questionnaire. So by research and the data that's informed us of where we have internet access and where we know that these individuals would have the ability to go online, we'll mail out an invite. And then, of course, within that mailing, it also will give them an opportunity to go on to call on the telephone to our contact center and to respond. The mail-out will not all happen on the same day, and that's why you see a range of dates, the 12th through the 20th, and this is so important because we need to have a support system in place in terms of people calling in with questions and in terms of giving the post office amount of time that they're going to need to deliver all of the questionnaires. So if someone says, I got my questionnaire on the 12th and somebody else didn't get theirs until the 15th, that's the plan. That is the plan on how we're going to do the mail out. March 16th through the 24th is when we'll start sending out reminders. Did you remember that you got an invite to go online? Or did you remember you had a questionnaire? Can you please fill it out and send it in? And then we'll continue that process through March 26th to April 3rd. If there is no response, again, the fourth mailing, the fourth box, April 8th through the 16th, every household that's not responded will receive another questionnaire in the mail. So even if you had one dropped off, you'll get another questionnaire. April 20th through the 27th is the final reminder and the postcard. That is key because after that point, we'll make the cut for the households that will have to actually go and knock on the door and visit. Talk a little bit about our census communication, and I do want to say that there is a prototype of the questionnaire, the paper form of the questionnaire that's on our website in case anyone is interested in the questions that are asked. But I want to talk a little bit about the research that was done, the behind-the-scenes research that was done, in order for us to determine what were some of the barriers, the attitudes, the motivators, what were some of the things that were going to help us to inform the community and make certain that we did the appropriate outreach to the appropriate community. So this survey was conducted, and as a result of that, you'll see the communication campaign unfold. So there were specific focus groups that were done with certain segments of the population, those with language barriers, those that may not necessarily or may have not have been born as Ann was speaking of during September 11th. But those individuals that, from different age groups, 18 to 25, who may not necessarily have been homeowners or renters at the time we took the last census. We want to know what they know about the census. So this information informed the Integrated Partnership and Communications Campaign. As you can see, this particular slide gives you a full complement of all of the things that are being done in order to inform, educate, and engage the public. I want to point to Statistics in School. And Statistics in School is an evergreen program, meaning it goes on all the time. But specifically, as we move towards the census, we have improved the website and provided more tools for schools and educators to use in order to inform and educate about the census. And then the next box, data dissemination. So on an ongoing basis, this is another evergreen process. that's in place. We have data dissemination specialists that will come out and do a workshop. They'll walk you through all of the data that's available on American Fact Finder and all of the information that we have. And those opportunities are available to groups, individuals. We have a person right here in the state of Michigan that is available to do those workshops as well. Advertising and media buying. So starting in January, you'll start to hear and see advertising about 2020. That's when you'll see a lot of the work that came out of the CBAMs and the research and the focus groups. And Y&R is the company advertising firm that was actually awarded the contract for 2020. So look for commercials and things like that to start happening around January. And of course, we're using social media, and social media used more to inform, more to engage. And of course, as we have a need to recruit over 400,000 people in order to do the non-response follow-up operation, it's important that we use social media to reach those individuals that may be flexible and have work time that they can give. They'll be paid to serve their country. This is giving you just an idea of the timeline in terms of the communication strategy and the plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we are in awareness, motivation, reminder, thank you phase, and all of that is underway as we speak. For the first time, you know, we've always supported the different diverse languages in this country, but on a national basis, these are the languages that will be supported with a questionnaire in these languages. But in addition to that, over 59 other languages, we will have what we call language assistance guides available, and individuals in our contact centers that if someone calls and needs assistance in those other languages, those other 59 languages, they will receive it. And I want to say this is by far the most robust language program that we have ever had in place in terms of the census, and we think that this will definitely help us to increase the response rate, but because it covers such a great part of our nation. I want to go through the partnership program. So this is where, and I want Elisa Johnson to please stand, and Bridget Weiss McGee. Bridget is the coordinator for the state of Michigan. Alicia is the Assistant Regional Census Manager for the 8 states. So she coordinates this program for all 8 states. Bridget is your coordinator for the state of Michigan. They are working, and I think Bridget has probably about 15 to 20 people on her team. They are assigned to go out and work with community organizations and local officials to educate, encourage, and engage. And I don't want to go too far without recognizing the state of Michigan and the great work that your governor has put forth. And I know I'm not going to take Carrie's presentation, but it's so exciting. And I think I've been to Michigan about, I said 15 times, but now it seems like 20 times. But it's not, it's been very, very, it's been a great opportunity because I've been supported primarily by all of the organizations within the state of Michigan, the Minnesota Non-for-Profit Association. They're all doing wonderful, awesome work to help us get a complete count. So real quick, and I don't want to miss the Kellogg Foundation, but real quick, this gives you a glimpse of all the people we partner with within the state of Michigan, and I expect that that map is going to be totally covered real soon. Just another little touch point on all the organizations that are working with us. And I want to say this, Michigan Non-for-Profit Association was one of the first organizations that reached out to us, so I know that we have the support and commitment to get a complete count. Some statistics about the state of Michigan, and I'm certain that everybody is fully aware, but 9,995,915, and I'm certain that number is ticking to 10 million. So that's where we are. This just gives you a little idea of some of the challenges we're facing, and I'm certain you're aware of those as well. And I'm not going to go through this, but we have a resource that tells you how to identify hard to count. And that's it. I'm going to end with that. I do want to encourage all of you, if you know anyone that's looking for an opportunity to serve, they can serve with the census. We're always recruiting, and we need many people to get this job done. Thank you for your time. I need every voice in here heard. We need a complete count in 2020. That's my mission and that's my goal. Thank you so much.
Okay, I am Noah Durst, Assistant Professor of Urban and Regional Planning at Michigan State University. I'm delighted to be here today. I will speak fairly briefly about the role of the census in guiding research, what I do as a professor, policy making and policy, the operations of policy on the ground, and then funding. And I'm actually going to talk about it in reverse order. I think funding is probably the thing that's on most people's minds or is most relevant potentially to the widest group of audience members. So I'll start with that. Before I do that, I just want to acknowledge Ms. Sanders and your team and the entire Census Bureau. I've worked with census data, either from the decennial census or one of the dozens of other census-related products. And I have always found that the Census Bureau is incredibly responsive, highly knowledgeable, and just so very helpful. And I'm actively using census products in my research. My students are regularly collecting census data, analyzing it, asking for help from the Census Bureau to understand it and use it appropriately. And I've just always been so very impressed with the Census Bureau, the services they provide. So I'd like to start by just looking retrospectively at the census 10 years ago. Every time the Census Bureau goes out and tries to census the population, get a count of every single person in the nation, there are any number of challenges in identifying every person. There are cases in which people or communities are undercounted, and then other cases where they are overcounted. A college student might be double counted, both from in their parents' household and then in the household in which they live at the university. 10 years ago, African Americans, Hispanics, and Latinos, renters, were undercounted systematically, and owners, non-Hispanic whites, were somewhat overcounted. This is a net over or undercount, so you're taking both the positives and negatives. This has direct implications, as I'll discuss, for funding, research, policymaking. There are a couple of online resources that you can find in the references at the end of the slides that will be available online that you can look at if you're interested. But they're very useful online mapping platforms that would let you go to your community and see if there are any neighborhoods or communities nearby that might be at risk for an undercount based on statistics from 9 years ago. So you would be able to look at both the characteristics of the community, the income composition, racial, ethnic composition of that neighborhood, and see statistics on how likely that community was to respond to a mailing, or the first mailing or second mailing 9 years ago, to give you a sense of whether that community might be at risk again of an undercount. This is from Hard to Count here. This mapping platform is very flexible. Ms. Sanders mentioned this Rome application that's also available by the Census Bureau, available online, really easy to use. You need no mapping skills to use it. I think they're very accessible. So that's what we know about the census 9 years ago, who was undercounted. And you can zoom right into, these are maps of, this is mostly Detroit and the suburbs around it. So you can see many of the neighborhoods that are at most risk in Michigan are located in that downtown, midtown, and the outer residential areas of Detroit are at most risk of being undercounted in the state. So what I'd mostly like to talk about, that's retrospective, what I'd mostly like to talk about is how census data are used once they are disseminated. There are dozens of different census-derived data products that are easily accessible and extremely useful. They inform research. Research then informs policy making. Policy making then informs the funding that's distributed to programs and then, of course, impacts outcomes. I'm going to talk about this in reverse, starting with funding. It's actually very difficult to determine at the outset how an undercount could impact funding for Michigan. There's some really useful online sources to look at how it could potentially impact it. You can see those in the references list. This is from Reuters, just documenting the size of federal budget programs. Hundreds of billions of dollars are allocated to the states every year, tens of billions to Michigan. Much of those go toward health and human services related programs. Those are the biggest pool of dollars. It's difficult to estimate how an undercount would impact state budgets simply because each program has a different set of eligibility criteria. Those might be geographic eligibility criteria, like whether a community is located in a rural area or urban area. They might be income-based eligibility criteria, a bunch of other issues. So it's actually very difficult to estimate it, but some scholars from George Washington University have done an excellent job of just giving us a preliminary estimate for 6 of the largest health and human services related programs, how an undercount of 1% would impact the state budget in Michigan. And they estimated for each person that is not counted, we lose about $1,000. That's only for these 6 largest health and human services related programs. That amounts to $94 million in one fiscal year for a 1% undercount. So we're talking about large sums of money that the state is potentially missing in the event of an undercount. And that's only for a select number of programs. There are many others that it's harder to estimate for. So that's funding. Policymaking. Census data are used for lots of activities that inform policymaking, but some of the policymaking issues that are probably most relevant or that you're most immediately aware of are apportionment, the distribution of seats in the House. It's based on the count that is conducted every 10 years. Each state gets 1 seat. The remaining of the 435, 50 go to the states initially, and then the remainder are split up based on state population. So an undercount could potentially lead to the loss of a House seat. It also informs, the census also informs the drawing of those electoral districts themselves. So the drawing or redistricting process is based on the census count, and so an undercount in specific areas could obviously have important implications for how those electoral districts are drawn. Then research. This is where I'll actually talk about some of the work that I do with Census Bureau data. The decennial census collected or conducted every 10 years provides us the most geographically precise data on the population in the nation. We can go down with census data to the block level, and in an urban area, a census block is typically a block, a city block. When you get out into a suburban or rural area, census blocks can actually be relatively large, but it's the decennial census that lets us count precisely who lives in a specific neighborhood and have some, important information about their demographic, age distribution, race or ethnicity. And these data are essential for a lot of the research that I do as a scholar. So to give you an example, I had mentioned redistricting. One of the things I do is conceptually related to redistricting. It's research on how cities expand their borders through municipal annexation. Cities change their jurisdictional borders all the time. This map shown here, based on research I did in South Texas, shows cities expanding around low-income Latino communities, but refusing to annex them, refusing to incorporate those low-income Latino neighborhoods into their city. It's a form of racial gerrymandering, the gerrymandering of city borders. And it is impossible to document this without census data. You need data at a small geography that documents race and ethnicity in order to bring a fair housing claim or a voting rights claim. And it's the decennial census that gives us those data, allows me to document these sorts of activities and to document the fact that after the invalidation of the Voting Rights Act, or Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act in 2013, cities across the South began to annex black communities at disproportionately low rates since they were no longer governed by the Voting Rights Act, or Section 5 of it. So that's the sort of work that I do with census data. It's essential. We can't do our work without robust census data. Other census products that I use aren't the decennial census, but the American Community Survey. One of the projects I'm wrapping up right now is building a statewide online mapping tool that allows users to log in and see where jobs in the state are located and where housing is located. This is a map of the Detroit metro area. Any area, the outlines in red are cities. Any area shown in red has a high concentration of jobs. Any area shown in blue or green has a high concentration of residents, but no jobs. The purpose of this tool is to allow state policymakers, local policymakers to log on, use the tool to identify where should we target economic development, where should we target housing. Without census data, this type of work just can't happen. And so I am regularly involved in downloading, cleaning, and analyzing these data. They're crucial, very important. And then if you're interested, all the references to the documents that I described are here. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good morning still. My name is Joe Scantleberry, and I'm one of the vice presidents for program strategy at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And I have the honor of supporting the teams that do our place-based work. Our place-based work, some of you may know, is in some really interesting places. Here in the state of Michigan, primarily Battle Creek, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. It's in New Mexico, Louisiana, Mississippi, the border provinces of Mexico, Chiapas and Yucatan, and in the central corridor of Haiti, as well as the southern tier of Haiti. And when you look at all of those places and you look at the demographics in those places, beyond Battle Creek, of course, right? That's hometown. Y'all know that, right? Kellogg, Battle Creek. You saw the cereal boxes, you remember? Okay. When you think about all of our places, one of the things we see in all these places is we see that these are places where there's long history of inequity. And as a foundation, we're very clear that we believe, and we know that you believe, that all children deserve the opportunity to thrive. All. And we know that children thrive when they're in families that are secure and capable, but also in communities where there's equity and equity of opportunity. And so as a foundation, a lot of our grant making is grounded. I would say almost all of our grant making is grounded in that core value, believing that communities, frankly, help themselves. And how do we partner with communities and leaders in communities? And I think for my portion of the presentation today, I'm here to celebrate Michigan. Because Michigan stepped up in ways that you heard a little bit about before, but I'm going to really try to bring it home to you so you understand the magnitude of it. First of all, Census Bureau staff, wherever I've met Census Bureau staff and wherever other funders have met Census Bureau staff, what we find is professionals who are focused on the project at hand, clear adherence to the Constitution, professionals committed to getting it right. So I just want to... As a foundation, when we stepped into this work, we stepped in because we understood and we learned that historically, children are undercounted, period. I'm sorry, I'm messing up my own presentation. You learn in the last census that more than 2 million children under 5 were not counted in the 2010 census. And you can imagine a normal family, children staying with an elder, children staying with a grandparent, a young adult who comes back home with children, census worker comes by or someone asks, who's in this household? That adult may not think that they're part of that household because it's not their house. You can imagine children in a foster family who may not think, the adult there may not think that those children count. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And as we learned that, we grew concerned that some of the challenges in this year's census, what I'm going to say, and I'm not looking to our federal colleagues here, but some of the underfunding in actually executing the census would actually lead to a further undercount. Some of the language in the debate, yes, we know, political debate, I'm wearing red and blue today. Okay, I know I'm supposed to wear green, I apologize. But I'm wearing red and blue simply because in Michigan, we are red and blue, and guess what? In Michigan, we understood that every Michigander had to be counted. Your leadership in this state, both legislative and executive, answered the call, found the resources, made the commitment. We're willing to partner with the Michigan Nonprofit Association, business leaders, and others to get it right. So a lot of good things have been done, but as you heard from Noah, there's more to be done. On your table, you'll see the 2020 census. When everyone is counted and everyone thrives, you'll see some references here. I encourage you to link in, share, share, share again, because there's work to be done. Let me share the power of this work. We all know and can appreciate that a diminished count will have an impact on the resources that come to this state. Any doubt, any debate about that? I'm just looking for head nods. We're all there. This is a policy group. This is a research group. You all get this. So I'm not going to propound and beat the horse. But what we don't always understand is what can our efforts do? And one of the things that one of my colleagues in New Mexico shared that I want to share with you. In New Mexico, the collaborative partners there realized that they were going to have a problem because they had a huge state, very rural, large tribal population, large Spanish-speaking population. They thought this was going to be a very, very hard population to count. So they estimated that they were only going to have about 68% turnout, right? As they started sharing information about the census and why it mattered and what impact it had on resources for roads, like Michigan, do we care about roads? Road funding. The impact that it had on Head Start funding, right? The impact that it would have on Head Start funding. The impact that it would have on the resources that would help us around water issues, resources that would help us around, community development and economic development, as you heard earlier. As they shared that information, what they found was a 94% response in some of the research they were doing among populations who they estimated they would only get 68% participation. I'm sharing this with you because a little bit of effort, proaction, partnership make a big difference. And they make a big difference in particular in communities where somebody knocking on the door might not exactly be welcome. Now, I'm not originally from Michigan, although I'm claiming it now. Learned to fly, fish, and everything. I'm here. But growing up in Brooklyn when I did, somebody knocking on your door, who are you? You might not even get a response. We also know that for some communities, the idea of anybody official or official looking or sounding who's not familiar, you're not going to get a response. And what I'm happy to say is that here in Michigan, the conversation on who should be responding to the timetable that Marilyn laid out, who should be preparing to do this work, how we should do this work, how we should think about culture and language, is being done in a very smart, proactive way. So much so that in the other places that I work with, they are trying to study what Michigan's doing. Okay? So Michigan, well done. Well done. Now, I know that there's going to be some Q&A, and maybe some folks who want to have partisan conversations around all of this, but today's 9/11, and Anne-Marie kind of opened it in a profound way that I wasn't ready for, so I'm going to go off script. That morning, I was driving to my job in East Harlem, coming across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I wondered, and it truly was a beautiful, crisp day. It was beautiful outside. And I wondered, what the heck is going on? Why is this traffic stalling? As I turned around from, those of you who visited Brooklyn know that there's the Watchtower building, there's a ramp that gets onto the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm trying to go up the FDR. And wonder what's going on here? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Why is everything stalled? As I'm coming across the bridge, seeing all these fire engines streaming, turn on the radio, and I'm listening, and I hear a plane hit one of the towers. So I look up, I can see the tower, and I'm thinking, it must be a small plane. Got swallowed in the whole building. What an idiot. How'd they miss, how'd they hit the building? Fire engines streaming across, and everybody's merging in almost a ballet-like, un-New York kind of way, like traffic moving out of the way for the fire department. As I turn on to the FDR, I learn about the second. And at that moment, as we all did, we realized that this was an attack. So I race up to East Harlem. My offices at that time were in the basement of the Johnson housing projects. And at that moment, that impoverished community was the safest place on earth, because we all said, nobody cares about poor people. Ain't nobody gonna bomb poor people. But as the day went on, and people were walking up the length of Manhattan to get to the Bronx, to get to the bridges, to get home, all throughout that community in East Harlem, poor community, people were handing out water, comforting people as they came up dust covered from below the city, from below 14th Street. What I experienced at that time is that there was no distinction between who was in our country at that moment, who belonged, who didn't belong, who counted, who didn't count it. There was no them, there was just an us together. So as I close, and I think about this census, what Michigan continues to demonstrate is there's just us together. And I hope that's the spirit in which we continue to move the message, share this information, and make sure that every child, every family, and that everyone counts here in the state of Michigan. Thank you.
First, I want to say, Joe, thank you for sharing that very personal and profound story. I think anytime 9/11 comes along, I was helping out on a municipal election in the city of Detroit. It was election day. And there was a moment we were trying to figure out, are they going to cancel the election? What does this mean? How many more there's a lot of questions going on in everyone's minds. And I don't think you can say it better than it's just us together. And how the census, again, is part of that as it relates to fundamental to our republic and our democracy and the importance of us all and our civic duty to work together to be counted. So with that, this adorable, it's not a stock photo. That's actually my son at 6 months old. And when I was working on the presentation this morning, I was thinking, as you know, a few of the speakers mentioned, kids under 5 get undercounted. And I think it's really, really important that not only you talk to your friends and neighbors about making sure their kids are counted when their census forms, or they go online to fill out the census form, but making sure that, you know, they let your networks know that it's really important that kids in households are counted. So, so that's Remy. So I was, as Anne Marie mentioned, I was appointed by the governor late July. I started August 5th, so this is 5 weeks on the job, not that I'm counting. But it very much has been a whirlwind, as you heard Mrs. Sanders walk through. This is a huge operation, the census effort. Nationally, it's the largest peacetime operation our country embarks upon. And I think as a James Madison grad from Michigan State University, I must also say that how cool is it that, you know, the first census was oversaw by Thomas Jefferson, right, in 1790, and I get to be a part of it here in Michigan. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about what we have going on with the state and our role. The governor appointed approximately a 60-person committee to serve on the state's Complete Count Committee. And there are representatives from the legislature. It's a bipartisan committee. There's representatives from the Township Association, the Michigan Municipal League, the Michigan Association of State Universities. The list goes on, you know, geographic representation too. Marquette folks have come down to be appointed to that committee, as well as West and Southeast Michigan. So it's a really diverse and exciting group of people that we just had our first meeting last week. There was over 100 people in the room. So outside the appointees, a number of the delegation, congressional delegation staff were there, as well as our departments from around the state of Michigan. So people are feeling energized and engaged and ready to partner. Another theme that I think we're hearing from all the speakers is we really need to partner together to execute this census well. So anyway, we're here to increase awareness and motivate residents. That's the goal for our committee, and we don't actually do the counting. A lot of people get confused by that. The U.S. Census Bureau does the counting. We are here, again, to partner and raise awareness. Also, recognizing government's unique role here in the state of Michigan, or everywhere, but we have a lot of public-facing entities and communication structure and offices, and we are working hand in hand with the departments to ensure that we are using every public-facing avenue we have in our capacity to ensure that folks are aware of the census, engaged, and prepared to participate come March of next year. So that's our role. I know this map is probably a little small, so now this is draft. I know we have some reporters in the room. So this was presented to the state committee last week. It has not been formally adopted, but what was presented was a little bit about our mission. Guess what? We've been growing. That's good news. Unfortunately, we lost population in the last census. We were the only state to lose population in 2010, but we have been growing by all estimates. And we need to ensure a complete count. We want to tell our story of not only the growth, but the economic opportunity that's here in our state. And we've already touched upon the importance of those congressional delegation members. We've been very lucky over our history to have some very powerful committee members from our congressional delegation. And we want to ensure that we do our best to get a complete count and hopefully protect the seats that we have. And then last, you'll see in the map, the Midwest, the dark green, and our state demographer, I don't know if Eric's in the room, but state demographer Eric Guthrie helped prepare this map, so I want to give him a shout out. The Midwest does really well in terms of the self-response phase, so that's prior to the actual enumerators going door to door. Michigan had in 2010 a 78% self-response rate, which was tied for 5th in the nation. Pretty cool. But my question is, do we have any Wolverines in the room? All right, there we go. Spartans? There's a few more. All right. Any Badgers? Oh, we got one. Listen, you guys are like #1 for the last 2 censuses in terms of self-response. So in 2010, you had an 82% response rate, but I think you're going down this year because we're going to do our best to compete here for that 82% self-response rate. So now, with that said, this is a hard goal, okay? Because I'm gonna rattle off a few other statistics from the CBAM's, the Census Barriers and Motivators study that Mrs. Sanders was referencing earlier. So prior to the census, they do a study 2 years in advance that in 2010, so in 2008, they did a study where when asked, there was 85% of folks that planned on filling out their census going into the 2010 census. 85%. Now, they later found that there was still about a 10% drop-off. People kind of over-predicted that they would, go through and follow suit and fill out their census. This time, the recent CBAM study, the respondents, there was 67% plan to self-respond in the 2020 census. So we have a huge challenge in front of us. There are hard-to-count communities, which I think Joe very eloquently described in terms of the challenges in getting everyone counted there. But there's also a number of folks that would typically self-respond that are thinking maybe they won't do that this time. So we need, again, to raise the awareness and educate people on the importance of the census. So anyway, that's a little background on our mission and census and the challenge that I give to all of you to partner with us. Now this, I don't know, I'm not a PowerPoint expert, so bear with me on some of the graphics. And you can see the Census Bureau is the smallest dot. It's not because it's the smallest operation, it's the largest operation, but it's the core and fundamental piece in the foundation to the entire operation. They're the ones that do the counting. They do a huge role in public awareness. The Michigan Nonprofit Association, MNA, as you heard, is one of the first in the nation to step up and carry the banner as it relates to census work here in Michigan and beyond. So thanks to them for helping lead the way over the last couple of years. This is what's been wild to me as I've come into this position is the local complete count committees. So there's, you saw Mrs. Sanders' map earlier in terms of there's municipalities, townships, counties, each that have complete count committees. So in one of our, roles or one of the things I'm considering part of my role as I work with our state complete count committee is how can we bridge all of these operations in the field as the Michigan nonprofits are engaging nonprofits through their 13 hubs around the state, as there's many local complete count committees and different municipalities and local governments are putting resources behind their census operation. We want to help partner with all of those efforts to make sure it's comprehensive. So that's just a little bit there, I think. Oh, there's my kid again. He's 2 now. That's from his daycare. But again, remember to count your kids and please pass the word on that. And I look forward to partnering with you all as well as the panel. So thank you.
So it's your turn to get in on this discussion, and we have a question back there. Thank you. A lot of great information. We will have all of the PowerPoints posted on our website, including the link to the video. So thank you.
Two quick questions. So we were told that in the 2010 census there was an undercount by 2 million or a little over 2 million kids under 5. What was the total undercount estimate in the 2010 census? And secondly, this last figure that got reported about a survey that was done to say how many people are likely to fill out the census, to my mind, that statistic says the hard-to-count populations, the definitions, the conceptual understanding of who that is has significantly changed for this census. And so I'm hoping that there's a lot of attention paid to what that difference is and what the messaging and the messengers have to be in order to get over that hurdle.
Sure, I'll just at least the last portion of that is we got to hang out, because that's completely on my mind in terms of who are those people that would typically respond that are not. We're evaluating how to do additional research, polling and survey work into the field to, again, dig into those results, figure out who they are and how to best talk to them and who the best messengers are.
And one of the ways in which philanthropy tried to respond to that very issue, recognizing that there are new populations and different ways that people are thinking about census or experiencing attitudes towards being questioned, we, the Kellogg Foundation, gave $5 million to a national consortia of other funders in an effort to develop a census equity fund that would, in effect, provide resources in multiple places where we know there are hard-to-count populations, but we also know that those communities themselves have to define what that means. So, for instance, this morning coming across here, I-94 was jammed. No surprise. So I ended up taking 66 from Battle Creek to get here. All of the small communities, right, mobile communities that are tucked away, that don't show up in the various townships, who's counting there? What does the experience of knocking on doors there look like versus where I grew up in a place like New York City where you could get 100,000 people in one housing project? What does that look like? We've got to actually be nimble and creative and agile, and we have to have the flexible resources to do that.
Go ahead, please.
Just a couple comments. So we talked about complete count committees and the map, how we're reaching out to the local governments. One of the opportunities that we have when we're sitting down with the mayor or whoever he has designated is to ask him to give us insight as to what's the hard to count in terms of his community. Of course, the research and the data informs us based on information that we have from the American Community Survey as well as from 2010. But that contact with that mayor is so important to us understanding what is the current hard to count population in their city. Also, what informs that for us is we conduct in some areas what we call solutions workshops. And that's where we bring people together from different communities within the particular city, different ethnicities, and talk about the barriers that will keep them from responding. So the solutions workshop is one tool that we use. And of course, as we're sitting down with the mayors, we're asking them that question. What do you consider your hard to count areas are?
I would also add the significance to, again, the representation in the room. It covers a lot of demographics, the Tri-County Office on Aging, the Great Start, Ingham County Great Start Collaborative. These are people with children, young children. Capital Area United Way, the Farm Bureau, I'd mentioned them before, covers rural areas. So a lot of territory covered here in our audience.
Can I just take one additional moment? So I'll get this for you, but the Bureau has a portal on our site, that gives you all the detail on the undercount from 2010, and it breaks it down by community, by county, and it tells you specifically the tracts that were undercounted. So at the end and during the census, we do a post-enumeration survey, and that survey is used to determine the over or under count. But I will get that information for you, but we do have a lot of detail on 2010 to get down to the individual levels of where the undercounts were and in what segment of the population the undercounts were in 2010.
We can send that out to our registration list and post it on the website as well. Thank you, Ms. Sanders.
Well, I actually happen to be from the Tri-County Office on Aging, and we've been worried about the online aspect of the survey distribution this year, and so that's a huge focus for us in connecting with older adults and adults with disabilities, both from a generational perspective, their concern or apprehension about doing something online, internet access, comfortableness, etc. My reaction to the why is it so low, that was the first thing that jumped to my head is if I'm being told I have to do it on the computer, I don't know how I feel about that as an older adult who is not as comfortable. So it's really, really, really critical that for some of the folks that we think about that technology, usually that's meant to be an enhancement, but in this case it might be a barrier for some of our communities. Now it's helpful to know that there is the phone number, because somehow in the translation of preliminary information we are hearing online is online and online. But to know that they could just call right from day one is helpful. So we need to do a better job of communicating that to our constituencies as well.
I'm sorry, I'm just always jumping in. The one thing that that I'm reviewing is the ability to do patch-through calls, so we can address match with listed phone numbers at least that being able to patch through into the U.S. Census Bureau numbers, so they can fill out directly through their phone number to encourage them. One. Two is another thing that we're partnering with organizations to promote having laptops or kiosks.
And we're doing that.
Right? Okay, because I know that, I have a friend who runs Focus Hope, and she was like, their senior meals program, she's like, they don't want to open their door to someone they don't know, so they want to make sure that they're providing access, and then also the trusted person from their community saying it's okay, so.
Good. Very good, thank you.
Oh, yeah, there's one over here. In the red.
Thank you. You took one part of my question, but I want to go further that I'm from Grand Haven Living Center. I'm the exec director there. And we have a component to add to that senior consideration, and that would be the dementia piece. And how are we counting those individuals that are housed in a senior community? Are the staff members going to be asked to assist? How would we invoke and engage? Some real consideration. I have 100 beds, so we've got a larger population, and them going online is an absolute no. Calling in is also an absolute no. Filling it out is a no. So we need some additional consideration from that standpoint. The other piece is, as I train for our sorority in our local chapter here, when does the website actually go live? As we're directing folks and saying you're going to get an invitation and then you're going to be, reminded. Does it not open until that first March date?
That's when it will be live.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Sanders can best answer probably both those questions.
Thank you.
So once the mail out starts on that March date that I had up there, March 12th, I think it is, that's when it will go live. Okay. So I also want to just make a point. Based on the type of senior facility, it may be part of our group quarter enumeration. Okay. And we will reach out to the facility manager and make sure that we have a POC. Okay. And some of those, based on the type of facility it is, there is an opportunity to use administrative records. So that gets into a whole nother discussion. Okay. Thank you.
Here and then here.
Yeah, I have two questions for Mrs. Sutton. One is maintaining privacy of the individual respondents' data. After the data is accumulated, is the individual's response data destroyed so that researchers or anybody can't go back and look at the individual's data? And then the second question is, what do you do to maintain or to guarantee the validity of the data? For instance, there may be some respondents that think that they answer truthfully, it may adversely impact them.
Okay, so every employee is sworn for life in terms of the data stewardship and making certain that any data that is collected is protected. But in addition to that, no data is ever released without it being released as statistical data. So that's how we safeguard the data. First, those collecting the data are sworn for life, and then the individuals that's actually tabulating and calculating the data. Of course, the Bureau has extensive security in place in terms of making certain that every respondent's data is secured and safe. I do want to add, though, to that extent, we are, of course, for the first time, most of the data is going to be collected on either an iPad or an iPhone, and that data is automatically transmitted as it's collected. So those are the ways that we ensure first confidentiality, privacy, and security. To your second question, which I'm forgetting, it was relative.
It has to do with the validity of the data. In other words, some respondents may feel that if I answer truthfully, it may come back and adversely affect me. For instance, maybe a person lives in Bloomfield Hills but has no income. You know, how that doesn't.
Okay, so the census is 10 questions, right? And so basically, based on the review of that data, if we find that we're missing some data points, we'll give a call back. But the Bureau has several quality control measures that are in place as we're collecting the data. So in addition to, as I talked about, non-response follow-up and the staff that goes out to collect the data, there's a quality control that's done on that data at the time it's being collected and then after. When we talk about the collecting of the data on the handheld, and there are, and I cannot go through all of them here, but there are processes and procedures in place to make certain that we're not getting responses from multiple IP addresses. So that's just one of the ways that we do some of the quality checks on the data that's being provided. In addition to that, the Bureau also utilizes different quality control teams that are looking at the data as it's being collected and then reaching back, and I don't want to go through all of the details, to make certain that the data that we're collecting is accurate. So there are re-interviews that's done as part of our quality control. There's checks and balances from other various data that we have in-house in terms of determining the validity of the data.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Delgado, and I'm here representing the Mexican Hub Alliance. My question is, as a Mexican American, how is the census this time going to work with those Mexican Americans, Hispanic, Latino, who currently may not feel safe in participating in the census? Because a lot of people in the community are under the impression that you're going to use this information and it's going to have them highlight people that maybe shouldn't be in the communities. And with our Alliance group, we're trying to, now we have a helper coming up, and we'd like to be able to give people, this is coming about. It is to your benefit to participate in the census. What can I tell them to assure them that nothing's going to come back on them? Because, you know, as we know, sometimes I've had board members that have been said things to them while they're walking down the street, and they're U.S. citizens. So I'm just curious as to how the census will work to ensure that you're participating in this, there's nothing to fear from providing your information, and what can I tell the people that come in the healthcare that you need to participate because this equates to knowledge and services for your community.
So I want to start by saying the number one place where you can help us is you being that voice. We understand the fear that is before us in terms of getting a complete count. So I talked about the partnership team, the staff that's out there. We're hiring partnership staff locally. We're hiring partnership staff that represents all areas of the community. And in doing that, we are hopeful that we can get trusted voices to help us to send that message that it is safe, that it is secure, and that it does benefit you. The Census Bureau will not share your data. The Census Bureau will release the data in terms of the numbers. So it is the messaging and the voices, the complete count committees, the state level, the non-for-profits, it's all of us giving that message clear that the census is important and your data is safe. But I think it starts with you, and I would love to have you as a trusted voice.
I think you're hired.
And I just want to add on to that. One of the reasons why we made the Grantham Michigan Nonprofit Association is to make sure that the network of providers and partners all throughout Michigan were on the front page early on and part of the conversation from the beginning. The challenge that communities have who fear being counted, noticed, is a real fear, and we have to acknowledge that. It's a fear that's been unfortunately stoked. But as I reflected on presenting today, I knew this question would come up, and I reflected on the fact that it started with the Constitution. At the time of that Constitution, I would be chattel. I wouldn't be a human being here. And yet still, from then until the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, I would still be counted. Okay? I would still be counted. So at this time, I think it's important for us to say very clearly in one voice, somos aquí. We're here.
My community has an inordinate number of people that are elderly living in condos, but they're snowbirds, and they tend to, head out in November, maybe around Thanksgiving time before the snow flies, and they probably won't be back, or they may not be back until after April 1st. Are they going to be able to register early enough in my community where they get counted, rather than be counted, say, in Florida where they're snowbirding, or Texas or Arizona?
So the Bureau count people where they live most of the time, right? So in terms of making certain that those individuals are counted, and there's a question, is this your address where you live most of the time? So we use sort of like it's 12 months in a year, so if you're spending 7 months at this location, this is where you need to be counted. The census is an address-based census. We make certain that we get a response from every household. And then we do have the technology to do what we call unduplication, to make certain that you're not being counted in both places. But the question that I would put before us is to make certain that when they receive that invitation to respond, whether they're receiving it at the location in Arizona, wherever, that they respond accurately to the question, where do you live most of the time? And then respond that way. But the Bureau does do unduplication, and that's part of the process that we do.
Can I just add to, I think, before folks leave town, we have partners, like AARP that may be able to touch base with a number of snowbirds that are already a part of their networks. But if you as a community can help identify their contact information, like whether it's a cell phone or email, because again, we can send reminders, the census form is live. If you spend a majority of your time in Michigan, please fill out at your resident address in Michigan. So it's just another layer of advocacy that we can work on.
Hi there. My question is, at the state level,
how much will outreach workers be allowed to do? Are we just advocating and educating, or will we be able to assist those who need assistance in filling out the census?
I'm sorry. So, I'm going to not answer your question directly. I am going to refer you to a document that I will provide. But the Bureau has done some research in determining, specifically since we have complete count committees and individuals assisting us, how far you can go. So, with that being said, I will tell you that the census is self-response. We expect everyone to respond for themselves or for their household. You can motivate, you can educate, and you can encourage. But can you respond for that person? That is not something that we are supporting. We're supporting self-response. But I do have some details as to what can and cannot be done. So I would just like to leave that at that for this moment.
Here enough. We have a question right here as follow-up. Did you have something to follow up with?
I was just going to say, I think in addition, there's obviously many language services the U.S. Census Bureau is also providing for these question assistance through online and through the phone. But we're also working with a number of local count committees of having in-person question and response centers around the state, as well as looking at how we can provide additional resources through the State of Michigan website. So when folks, as it relates, if language is a barrier, we want people to be able to engage in their first language. So we're trying to make that as easy as possible.
Great. Well, that was part of my question, because I'm the director of the Refugee Resettlement Program here for Lansing. And there's still a few of us out there in the rest of the country. But part of, it's not just language, and I really appreciate all the languages that you're providing. And some of them are, you really have to, go and get like the really tiny languages, that there's not a lot of people that speak them, because those people need to be counted too, like Rohingya, from Burma, and Sangha from Central African Republic. It's really hard for us to find those languages on language lines, so we might have to do some digging for that. And we'll certainly help with, the census here locally. But literacy can also be an issue. So I think the home visits help. But also, I think, I'm wondering, because I'm watching how you're going to do this with mail and home visits. Have you thought about working with businesses and where people work? Because some of these businesses where you have a large population of people who are working, maybe they can help organize. You can have a group of people who are, helping to translate and understand and fill out the forms together. Because a lot of people, they go to work, they come home, they might not open the door when people come. And if there isn't a translator or an interpreter right there, it might not work to have somebody coming back. They might not go other places, but businesses and places of worship are where you can kind of, get people in big groups. And it's not just for Lansing, but it would be anywhere else where there's refugees.
Well, thank you for that. I do want to respond that we did a deep dive in the past, and currently we have national partnerships. So we have national partnerships with large national businesses, but we didn't do a deep dive in this presentation into the complete count committee makeup. But within a complete count committee, you can have a business subcommittee, you can have a faith-based subcommittee, you can have a community subcommittee. It all depends on how robust you want your committee to be. But the Bureau does have, and we do have, relationships on the national level. For example, there's a national partnership agreement with the American Library Association where they will allow individuals to use their computers in order to respond. In addition to that, they're helping us resource and get applicants. So that speaks to those other unique specific languages. If we can get people to get online, apply for a position, and be an enumerator, they can help us get a complete count of those communities. But thank you.
Yeah. Specific to the business point, I wanted to lift up the card once again. because of the Ready Nation listserv here. This is a business group's effort to make sure that the business sector participated hand in hand with the nonprofit, philanthropic, government, and doing it in a way that was responsive. So if there are businesses, business leaders, folks that you have any contact with, encourage them to be part of this effort as well. Because frankly, businesses understand the resources that don't come for the roads that we can't repair is not good for business.
Can I just add one quick, because I just thought about this. So in 2010, Cook County, which is the largest county in Illinois, had a complete count committee. And what they did to help inform using the business model is when the staff came in that day, they were able to see a message on their computer screen that said, "Did you get your census questionnaire? Please fill it out." So that's a really easy, unique way to get that message across. So I just wanted to point that out.
Very good.
And just a last little piece I would add is we have a number of business partners represented in our state complete count committee, from the Small Business Association to DTE and consumers. A couple of things. We obviously, as Mrs. Sanders mentioned, they all have outward-facing public communications, right? Websites, bill payments. We want to make sure they're putting those to work around the census. But also, they made the note, listen, no one pays for their bill through the mail anymore. Putting it in their insert. They're paying it through auto pay through their bank or credit union. So we want to figure out a partnership with them as well to see if there's a way to interface directly where people are paying their bills. So lots of things in the works.
Excellent idea. Okay, so we're coming close to our time, and I want to leave a few moments for our panelists to get the last word in. We've covered a lot of territory. This has been so important. There's been a real exchange here. We've talked about things I've never thought of, like people who have dementia. How can they be responsible in submitting their 10-question census form? People who have literacy issues, or how do we get to the snowbirds? Again, it's the place where you live the most. How do we handle validity and privacy issues? So there's a lot of information that has transpired here today. I talked about the role of everyone in the audience, and Spectrum Enterprises, Kim Kodos is here today filming this, and so we will post the video to our website, and you are free to use it in your communities to get a discussion going and to share this vast information. I don't want to leave here with any postcards that Mr. Scantlebury held up, and Bell is here passing out as well. So perhaps there'll be more of those available for you to distribute. I think I'll close there and just say, if you're looking for information, look to our website, look to the folks that you see here before you today. It's All of Us Together, right? This is the All of Us Together committee. Thank you for being here. We're going to start right here and just, Mrs. Sanders, if you would just close it up with one last word. Oh my goodness.
So it's hard to have a last word. But I'm going to say thank you, and I want to be back here December 31st of 2020 with a complete count for Michigan. So thank you so much. Appreciate your support, and I appreciate being here today. Thanks.
Very good.
Just like to reiterate how foundational the census is to what we know about our communities, how we identify the policies that can improve those communities, and how we distribute funding to those communities. So it's really the bedrock of how we do good work in the places that we live.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I simply wanted to say, first of all, well done, Michigan. There's more work to be done, and I want to encourage everyone to look at the Be Counted website. It's BeCountedMichigan2020.com, and you can learn a whole lot about how to continue to educate, how to engage folks in your communities, in your church or your synagogue, wherever, and frankly, empower people, right? Let's dispel the misperceptions around the Census Bureau. It's fine and fantastic and nonpartisan work, and let's just make sure everyone gets counted.
Thank you. Ms. Singh?
I think just mobilize, review your own networks and organizations that you're a part of. We will be providing additional information soon from the state of Michigan as it relates to toolkits and other information. And remember, the U.S. Census Bureau does the counting, and they are hiring. So please, that's step one. We need to make sure they have a full staff to get the job done. So please share that now to your networks, and you can apply for those jobs online. Yes. So I'm echoing Mrs. Sanders' pitch there.
What's the site to apply for the positions? I'll provide it. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
But I do want to offer something. There are 5 offices open in Michigan right now. And in those 5 offices, we need managers and we need support staff. So we have Detroit, Lansing, Traverse City, Oakland, and Macomb. Thank you so much.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you again. I certainly believe that everyone in the room has been represented in this conversation in some way. And if not, make yourself heard. Thank you for being here, and thank you for showing up on this really important day. I hope you take time at the end of the day to reflect on not only what you learned here this afternoon, but also the significance of what we're thinking about in regards to September 11th. So, thank you.
Thank you.